Most people never notice them. Tiny white dots jumping across the surface of our fish tanks. Too small to be insects and too active to be dust. They look like dirt that somehow learned how to move. But these dots are alive. And once you zoom in, you start to realize you're looking at one of the most ancient, finely tuned animals in your aquarium. This is the aquatic springtail, Sminthurides aquaticus, and this is a journey into the invisible world it lives in. At first glance, it's tempting to call a springtail an insect. It has 6 legs, antennae, a familiar body plan. But that assumption would be wrong. Very wrong. Springtails belong to a completely different class, Collembola. They aren't true insects at all. One key difference is hidden in plain sight, their mouthparts. These mouthparts are tucked inside their head. This condition separates them from insects and places them on a much older branch of the hexapod family tree. In fact, springtails are older than almost everything we keep in our aquariums. Fossil and genetic evidence shows that they've existed for over 400 million years, long before dinosaurs, long before birds, even long before the ancestors of fish like guppies or platies ever appeared. In many ways, the aquatic springtail is a living fossil, an animal that found a winning design early and never had to change it. In my home country Germany, interestingly enough, plays a major role in how we understand these creatures today. Much of what we know about European springtails comes from decades of research by scientists like Dr. Wolfram Dunger and institutions such as the Senckenberg Museum, which help map their distribution and ecology across the continent. So, when you see one in a German aquarium, you're not looking at a random hitchhiker. You're seeing a species that's been studied, documented, and quietly respected for generations of researchers. What truly makes the aquatic springtail extraordinary, though, is not its age. It's the way it walks on water. This isn't floating in the way a leaf floats, and it's not swimming either. The springtail is standing on an invisible floor, the surface film itself. The secret lies in its skin. The cuticle of a springtail is covered in an incredibly complex nanostructure, made up of primary and secondary granules arranged in an hierarchical pattern. This structure traps a thin layer of air against their body, forming what's known as a plastron. That air layer does 2 things at once. First, it acts as a life jacket, preventing water from wetting the body, and secondly, it also functions like a lung. Even if the springtail is briefly submerged, it can still breathe through this trapped air pocket. This is why water, oil, and even contaminants simply roll off its body. The animal remains dry while standing on liquid, a feat that still challenges modern engineering, but more about that later. And there's another tool helping it survive in moving water. Under the first abdominal segment sits a small tubular organ called the colophore. In aquatic springtails, it plays a crucial role in regulating water balance. But it can also act like a sticky anchor, allowing the springtail to grip on the surface film and resist being swept away by currents that in nature would occur through the water flow, or in our aquariums occur due to filters. If you watch long enough, you may witness something even stranger. A ritual that looks less like reproduction and more like a choreography. In Sminthurides aquaticus, males are much smaller than females. This is called sexual dimorphism, and it's a very extreme form of sexual dimorphism, in fact. And unlike most springtails, the males have specialized antennae designed for one purpose: clasping. When a male encounters a female, he grabs onto her antennae with his own. Instead of shaking him off, the female carries him, just like the anglerfish in the deep sea. Across the water's surface, the female carries the male for hours, sometimes even a day. This piggyback journey is often described as a marriage dance. As the female moves through her environment, the male stays attached, waiting for the precise moment to deposit his spermatophore, a packet of sperm, on the surface. Because the female is already positioned correctly, fertilization can happen even in dynamic, moving environments like a pond or your home aquarium. It's a remarkably precise solution to reproduction in a world where solid ground doesn't really exist. As strange as they may look, springtails are doing very familiar work in our tanks. They feed on fungal growth, mold, and bacterial biofilms, especially the thin layer that forms on the water surface and on floating plants like Amazon frogbit, or on plant leaves that reach the surface of our tank, like giant Vallisneria leaves for instance. For some reason, my aquatic springtails really seem to enjoy grazing on the brown and red biofilm that usually grows on my old Vallisneria leaves. They are also present on other floating plants, but in way smaller numbers. And I cannot really explain why that is the case. I just assume that old Vallisneria leaves would grow especially nutritious biofilm. In other words, they clean. Their presence often indicates high humidity and a stable microecosystem. Rather than being pests, I think aquatic springtails function as surface janitors, managing the biological film that would otherwise build up unnoticed. That's why they so often arrive uninvited, and why they tend to thrive in well-established ecosystems. What's even more fascinating is that scientists and engineers alike are now borrowing their ideas. The same cuticle that allows springtails to repel water and oil is being studied as a blueprint for omniphobic surfaces, materials that resist all liquids. This may sound familiar to you, as you may have heard of the lotus effect, which is used in many self-cleaning paints, for instance. However, the lotus effect only repels water. If you put oil or soapy water on a lotus-inspired surface, it will usually soak in. The springtail effect, however, is considered the next level lotus effect, because it repels almost everything, making it far more robust for industrial and medical use. A good example of biomimicry, where humans try to imitate elements found in nature to solve human problems. Researchers are applying these principles nowadays to medical implants, stain-resistant textiles, self-cleaning coatings, and much, much more. The goal is to recreate the springtail's ability to stay clean, dry, and bacteria-free under extreme conditions. So, it's entirely possible that parts of the technology you use every day were inspired by animals smaller than a grain of sand. Animals quietly skating across the surface of your beloved fish tank. The aquatic springtail doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't have bright colors or dramatic movements, like some of my extravagant fish. But once you understand what you're looking at, an ancient hexapod walking on physics, breathing through trapped air, performing hour-long courtship dances, and cleaning your aquarium surface, it becomes impossible to ignore. Sometimes the most extraordinary animals in our tanks are the ones we never notice at all. A big thank you to Belgian Bugs, JVP, Julius, and Dottie for your monthly support through the Guppy Gang membership. Your support makes this channel possible, and if you want to support my channel as well, consider joining the Guppy Gang, and I will mention you at the end of my next video as well. Speaking of next videos, if you are interested in finding out how the platyfish, Xiphophorus maculatus, help change cancer research, check out the video on the left or watch the video on the right hand side. Thanks for watching.